Can you share a little bit about what your health journey is?
Yeah, so probably, I guess, 3 years ago, I started having like these complex GI issues, vomiting, and like I couldn't keep food down. And it was like to the point where it was impacting my ability to work. And so I was going from like doctor to doctor, specialist to specialist, and no one could really figure out what was going on. And so I ultimately turned to a cash pay practice, someone who didn't accept insurance, and she like did all the tests and figured out what was going on with me, and I worked with her in conjunction with some holistic doctors to kind of work on the underlying symptoms in order to get like well and to be able to eat and not vomit every day and all of the other things that were going on. And so I really resonate with a lot of my clients who are healthcare workers, doctors or NPs or nurses, and they're doing this work and it's at the expense of themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Annmarie, and today I have a very special guest. Her name is Angelique. Hi, Angelique. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, Emery. How are you?
I'm awesome. So awesome. Just got off a vacation. So I'm like, wow, I need to work hard so I can go on more vacations.
How long were you on vacation for?
I was on vacation for 6 days.
Wow.
And it was like just enough to like I was starting to get homesick. Like I think 6, 7 days are a good vacation time.
Yeah, for sure. I love going to the beach. That's my favorite place.
Yes, the beach was so clear, the water was so clear. It was amazing. But enough about that. I want you to introduce yourself to the audience. And I know we met through LinkedIn, and I want to have you introduce yourself and like who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. So, hello, everyone. My name is Angelik Holloway. A lot of my clients just call me Angie. I am a business healthcare lawyer here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I essentially help protect medical licenses for various different types of doctors, as well as to help medical professionals start their own private practices. And so I help them start those businesses, scale those businesses, and then sell them if they are ready to offboard those and do other things in life. So my primary goal is to take legal things off of my client's plate so that they can kind of focus on building the practice of their dreams without burnout or icky lawyering.
Okay, that is very nice. So, can you talk about like the earlier years when you became an attorney and how you niched into private practices?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been practicing law now for 8 years. The time has really flown by, but I've been owning my own practice for just over five. And so when I first started my practice, I was doing predominantly litigation work in federal and state courts. And so I was doing discrimination work, employment, housing, contracts. I did some false imprisonment, some police misconduct, Eighth Amendment work, so all different types of civil rights cases. And I also did landlord tenant work on both sides, landlords and tenants. And so I did that for several years up until I had my last trial a couple weeks ago. About 2 years ago, I transitioned to growing a transactional practice. So all the things outside of court. And so last year, I niched down to medical practices and healthcare workers because I found that there was a lot of alignment with wanting to build a practice without burnout. I also love working with those clients. And then I have my own health kind of journey to get well, and healthcare workers really help me and influence my decision to want to serve that community.
That's amazing. Can you share a little bit about like what your health journey is? Like you don't have to go into detail, but just like how that attracted you.
Yeah, so probably, I guess, 3 years ago, I started having like these complex GI issues, vomiting, and like I couldn't keep food down. And it was like to the point where it was impacting my ability to work. And so I was going from like doctor to doctor, specialist to specialist, and no one could really figure out what was going on. And so I ultimately turned to a cash pay practice, someone who didn't accept insurance, And she like did all the tests and figured out what was going on with me. And I worked with her in conjunction with some holistic doctors to kind of work on the underlying symptoms in order to get like well and to be able to eat and not vomit every day and all of the other things that were going on. And so I really resonate with a lot of my clients who are healthcare workers, doctors or NPs or nurses, and they're doing this work and it's at the expense of themselves, right? And so it was the same for me. Like I was litigating, I had 40, 50 cases at any one time. It was a lot of trial work and I was burnt out. And so, in conjunction with my own health stuff, I was feeling unfulfilled in my law practice. And so, it was kind of like the perfect storm, so to speak, where I was able to see kind of how I could serve the community that also helped me.
Wow, that's very interesting that you had to go to an outside kind of doctor who doesn't accept insurance because I have a similar story. I was going in network, but I found out they were just like, they had a lot of cases and they had a lot of people they had to take care of. So when I went to this new doctor, she combines the holistic with the medical, like Eastern and Western medicine are combined together. And I feel so much better just from like being under her care. And I do have to pay a premium.
Yeah.
So it's like you kind of have to invest in yourself. Like I know some people don't have the option to go out of network, but I believe in advocating for yourself. Like if they don't have the time, you need to go the upper chain of command and let them know like this is not right. Like I need help. And that's what this show is about. It's about advocating for yourself as a healthcare worker and as a patient and also
Right.
learning about your passions. So
Yeah,
do
absolutely.
you consider like your attorney work in healthcare your passion, or do you have other passions that you do?
Yeah. So, I mean, lawyering is one of my passions for sure. I think going through my own health stuff and like trying to figure out if I even wanted to practice law, that was one of the things I asked myself because the type of law that I was practicing wasn't serving me. Right. And so it was like, you're kind of wrestling with like, do I want to do this anymore? Right. I went to law school. I was like, I'm going to work for the people. I'm going to do civil rights. I'm going to help people who have been disenfranchised. And then I found that that work was actually hurting me, the vicarious trauma and all of those things. And so I think, in the medical field and also in the legal field, we have to think about like ways that we want to use our skill set where it's not harming us, right? You can serve, but not sacrifice yourself. So it's definitely one of my passions. But in addition to law, I love lifting weights, like heavy weights. I have a trainer that I work with who's a PT and she's incredible. And so I love to, max out and I usually work out. I lift weights 3 or 4 days a week. I do hot yoga 2 days a week. I love to hike with my dog Grover and my husband and I, we love to travel to like international beaches. That's kind of one of our favorite things to do. So it's one aspect of who I am. It's not my entire life, but I do really enjoy helping healthcare workers and doctors of all different types kind of rediscover their love for medicine.
That is awesome. And when you talked about how being in law, like you wanted to help people in the beginning, like that was your main objective. But then when you got into it, it's like, this is totally different than what I thought it was going to be.
Right.
So, how did you manage to like, because you still need to get your experience and like, did you want to quit right away or did you like stick to it?
Yeah, I think it was a process for me. I think everyone has their own kind of, I guess, self care journey or self care discovery, especially if they have a high pressure career. You have to figure out, like, what are you willing to sacrifice and what are you not willing to sacrifice? I think for me, there was a lot of things happening personally in my life. So my grandmother who raised me, so she was essentially my mom, she got sick and was really very sick. And so, in her last, months of being on this earth, I had to kind of reckon with who am I outside of lawyering? Am I a caretaker? Am I a sister? All those different titles that we carry. And I think for me, I had to redefine what it meant to be a lawyer. So it's like the pressure is you sacrifice everything. You're always on. You take more cases. You take more clients. You accept calls at 10 p.m. Like that's the expectation, right? Same for the medical, industry. They're like, okay, you need to have 200 patients, 8-minute appointments. Like, we don't expect you to have lunch. We don't expect you
Mm.
to take a vacation. Like those expectations that are put on you based off the industry, right? And
Yeah.
so I had to reconsider, like, okay, I still think I want to practice law, but I don't want to subscribe to the systemic kind of pressure or expectation that means if I'm a lawyer, I can be nothing else or be nothing else well, right? So then you don't have time to show up for your family or show up for your spouse or, do the things that fulfill you in other ways, right? You don't have to be kind of that one dimensional type of. And so for me, I think it's kind of like revisiting that. Why did you originally go to law school? Like to help people. But that didn't, my personal statement didn't say I was going to sacrifice my health, my mental well-being, my emotional well-being, my family. Like those weren't things that I committed to. But I found in the practice of law that those things were things that were kind of put at the altar. And so I kind of did a lot of therapy, a lot of coaching, and decided to create a practice that served me and my client.
That's amazing. That I wouldn't say amazing, but it's just sometimes in my life, I had like a breakdown moment where I kind of reevaluated my life, and it was like hitting a brick wall.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I need to stop. I need to reevaluate. And I think that's what happened when your grandmother got sick and you had to be a caretaker, and you just had to reevaluate. And I think I wish we didn't have to wait till something is wrong to make a change. Like, I wish
Right.
we could evolve. And that's how I'm learning as I'm growing. Like, I want to make sure I check in with myself every day to say, like, hey, are you okay? Like, what needs do you need right now? And articulating the needs, because we think that we need to do everything on our own, but we really don't.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really key point, Annmarie, of like just checking in with yourself, right? Because otherwise, it just gets out of hand, and then you become susceptible to burnout or all different types of ailments that manifest in your body if you don't listen, right? If you're not creating a space for change or to pivot, right? When something is no longer serving you.
Yeah. And I know you talked about the system, like the system makes it okay for a client to call you at 10 p.m. and you don't have like you don't have boundaries around
Yeah.
that. And I really like, I feel like every sector has that. Like, healthcare has it, law has it,
Yeah.
like all the different, like, I don't know, like the system. Like, I'm personally am trying to build a platform to like voice and make change, but I know I'm not going to be able to change the system just from me. Like, I know like the system has been built for over 100 years before I was even thought of, but I know that if I focus on myself and focus on giving out of the overflow, because I know that people say don't pour from an empty cup, but
Right.
I kind of like discard that. I'm like, I'm not waiting till I get an empty cup to realize that I need to fill my cup. My cup is always full. I'm always filling from the overflow, and that's how I go about my business.
I love that. I love that. Always filling like that. That's incredible.
Yeah. So in your law experience, I'm going to change gears and we're going to talk about how to best represent yourself. Like, if you are a healthcare worker or someone who is in law and you are facing unsafe conditions, or you have burnout inducing conditions, like, can you take legal action? Like, what protections do you have as an employee?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a very nuanced analysis, but I'll give kind of a high level. So, The way that I encourage my clients to think about it is obviously you got to take care of self first, but then right beyond yourself would be your license, right? Your medical license, whatever your training, your credentials. And then after that, it would be your employer, right? And so a lot of times that's flipped, right? So people will say employer and then their credentials and then maybe themselves. And so it's the same concept that you're talking about as far as like an empty cup, or like when you're on the airplane and they tell you to put your mask on first before you are able to assist other individuals. So the first thing is to make sure you're in a place to be able to provide medical services, right? Because from a risk reduction perspective, like if you don't have capacity to do that, like that's kind of the first kind of realm that you should be fixing or addressing before you like step into work, right? So whether that's PTO, if you need to take a self-care day, if you know whatever your options are within your employer's framework, if it's still in a certain point where you need to go on FMLA, then you know going through that procedure as well. But then the second one is your license, right? So obviously, depending on what your licensure is, you have regulatory obligations in order to maintain that license. And so to make sure that you're not doing anything to put yourself in harm's way is to make sure that you're complying with those regulations, right? So if you are burnt out, you've worked overtime and you can't keep your eyes open, then you probably shouldn't be providing any type of medical care services because you're putting your license at risk, right? If something goes wrong, that patient files a complaint or your employer files a complaint against you for violating whatever policy, then you're risking your livelihood. Even though it's directed from burnout, it's still something that needs to be at the forefront of your mind. So I always start with that, kind of just making sure you're protecting your license and your credentials. If the job is not a good fit, I mean, there's ways that you can use coaching or find a new fit. But if you lose your license, then, you know, your opportunities to be able to bounce back are going to be diminished significantly, or it's going to be in another field. So I always say, you know, think about your license and your well-being and your capacity first. And then after that, you get into your employer, whatever your employer contract is. So your capacity to go on FMLA, to take PTO. You have OSHA. If there's unsafe working conditions, you can file a complaint there. If it's discrimination and things, you can file a complaint with EEOC. So there's different, you know, federal organizations and state ones that you can file a complaint with. But again, those are kind of slow and long processes. The first thing you want to do is protect yourself and your license, and to make sure that you're documenting everything in the event that you have to defend yourself, that you have the evidence you need to do so.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the documentation point because there's some people who will actually go and voice their concerns, but there's nothing that proves what they're saying. So I think having like the evidence really makes a difference. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, so, you know, in the law, we say if you don't write it down, it didn't happen.
Happen.
So it just kind of highlights the importance of the last thing you want to do as a healthcare professional is kind of be in this place of he said, she said, right? Especially if you're dealing with a superior or an employer, you know, you all are not in the same equal footing, right? So they can say, oh, you violated this policy and you didn't, you know, fill out the chart, or you didn't, you know, do whatever was required in order to protect yourself. Now you're in a position where, you know, you're going to be written up or fired or disciplined. So definitely, definitely. I always say if you're going to have like a conversation with HR, always follow it up with an email, right? Summarize, hey, we just met, you know, at 12:15 p.m. and we discussed A, B, C, D, and E, and I'm going to follow up with you at this day and time, right? To see what the status of this is. So that way there's some kind of paper trail if you're having verbal conversations or reporting things.
Okay. So if someone like voiced their concerns or they did complain to like OSHA or something, is there something that protects them from retaliation?
For sure. I mean, so to be practical, we can talk. There's a difference between what the law says and what happens in reality, right? And I'm always real with my clients. Like, it's illegal to retaliate when you file a complaint, OSHA, or you whistleblow, or you file discrimination, right? Those things are unlawful. Now, whether or not they happen in practice, that's a totally different thing, right? So it's a balance of, you make this complaint, you try to protect yourself. Some of these agencies you can file anonymously, so that might be something worth, considering. But there is potential for an employer to violate the law by retaliating against you in sort of like indiscriminate ways, right? So, for example, something that I've seen in my practice is, you file a complaint and then now you are taken off of all of the future meetings, right? The leadership meetings, right? So now it's hard to say, like, okay, this was because I filed the complaint, but if you put together the facts, right? You were on the meetings before, you filed the complaint, now you're not. Now you don't have the capacity to do your job well, right? Or you're missing information, you're missing access to information, right? So it's something that I can encourage my clients to think about, like, strategically, as to protect yourself, because a lot of times there is a mismatch between what the law requires and what employers may actually do in practice.
It's so bad. That's
It does. It honestly does, Anmarie. And it's like, that's one of the candid conversations that I have to have with my clients, because I can tell you what the law says all day, but that doesn't mean, like, when you're in the workplace and you see them taking away privileges or opportunities or denying you a promotion or a bonus, like, you will see the real impacts of so quote unquote anti-retaliatory framework that's not really being followed in the workplace.
okay. So I guess it's best to like do your research before you get hired so that you know what you're dealing with. So like in that aspect, like what red flags should healthcare professionals watch out for before signing with a new company or a new employment contract?
Yeah, so I mean, I encourage my clients to think about it as like a dating scenario, right? You guys are both trying to see if you like each other enough to move forward. A lot of times people are nervous to ask some of the hard questions because they feel like they're not equally positioned to the employer. But that's the best time for you to figure those things out. So I would say ask pointed questions, like during your interview when you have the opportunity. Look online, see what other past employees have said. If you have connections or someone that you might know that has worked there previously, reach out to them, try and get some insight into what's going on with them and how they run their business. I mean, some of the things you want to look for obviously is in the employment contract. If you decide you're going to move forward, is to make sure that that protects your interests, that there's not unreasonable expectations. They expect you to be, on call all the time, right? You don't have any breaks, right? You want to think about things like that before you move forward, because those could be potential red flags for unsafe working conditions.
Yeah, and sometimes like like gone through social media and stuff, like people are talking about their grievances. So
Yeah.
like is there protection if you're voicing or you're venting about your job online, like, but they don't mention any like patient details, like is there, I'm sure there's like social media policies and
Yeah.
like your jobs, you have to like look at that, but what do you think about that?
I mean, so generally I would advise against doing that, only because there's so many nuances, right? So like you said, you have your employment policy, your employment contract rather, and then usually there's an incorporation clause which refers to the employment manual, right? The employment manual is usually huge, like 200 pages or whatever. And you have social media policy, you have like public relations policies and all of these things of how you can interact with the public with respect to your actual position. So, unless you have legal counsel, I just find that it's usually too risky. And then you have HIPAA stuff as well, right? So, you want to make sure you're not violating HIPAA, because most of the time in the healthcare space, if you intentionally violate HIPAA, that's usually a termination or a fireable offense. So I just think a lot of times it's like, I mean, there's so many loopholes you have to go through. I don't know if you want to risk your employment in order to make a point.
Yeah, I know, because there's been a lot of people that have gotten fired for voicing their grievances on the internet. And I think the employer is just looking at, they don't want to be put in a bad light. Like if you
Mhm.
put them in a bad light that and mess up their reputation, they don't want you to do that. So
It's
I'm
kind
like
of
staying clear from
right. So it's kind of like you want to like balance. So like if there really
that.
is like some unsafe things going on in the workplace, obviously you can file a complaint with OSHA or report them, etc. Now when you do that, that's protected activity, right? So if they retaliate against you and fire you after that, at least you would have some kind of cause of action to move forward. Like when you just post on social media, it's not the same as, doing a formal complaint of a safety concern, right? Or a discrimination concern. So there really aren't any protections. And then you get into the realm of, okay, is what you're saying like slanderous or libel, right? And so like, there's a difference between saying, okay, my employer doesn't follow the policy with respect to, documenting patient records, right? Which could be a fact or disproven, one or the other, right? Or versus saying my employer is horrible. Like they treat employees like crap and et cetera, right? That's an opinion, right?
Right.
So then you get into all of these things about whether or not those statements are slanderous, right? Do they cause
Mm.
harm to your employer? So now you've opened up yourself to, potential defamation lawsuits, which obviously I don't recommend.
Yeah, I don't recommend that either. I don't even know law, and I recommend not doing that. So I wanted to talk to you about okay. So we talked about how employers deal with employees. So if you take like the flip side, if you are an employer and you have employees, how do you protect yourself from that?
Yeah, so I work with, private practices. They normally have a small staff of 20 people or less. And so the things that I recommend is obviously to have really strong employment contracts, really well drafted employment manuals, and training, right? All those things need to work in concert with one another. So, like an example of a recent case that kind of came up wasn't my client, it was another lawyer's client, but basically she had a small business, and she was a physician, and she had two employees. Now one of the employees was upset. She ended up putting her on a performance improvement plan, and then after that terminated her. So anyway, she deleted patient data from her electronic health record before she was escorted off. And so, anyways, that's kind of just an example of kind of a nightmare scenario where you want to make sure that with your HIPAA encrypted portal, your client portal, your EHR, that you have different roles and privileges within there. So you don't want like your medical assistant to be able to delete patient data, right?
Yeah.
That would violate the, Georgia medical board rules. It violates HIPAA. Like, you don't know what she did with those. Did she write them down? Was she going to
Hmm.
try to give them away to someone else to compromise, the infrastructure of the organization? So you have to have like a system and an infrastructure to protect your business, your license, and your patients.
So is there so you were in the system, now you're working for yourself. Like, do you think you made the right decision?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So before I started my own practice, I worked for a nonprofit. That was my first job out of law school. And then I clerked for a chief judge. And I loved clerking. Absolutely. It was probably one of my favorite legal jobs. And then after that, I worked for a small firm for a little bit before I started my own. And I love the freedom, and it's also the responsibility, but to be able to serve the people that I want to serve, and to, change things, right? Like we talked about, like changing it to fit where I am in my life now as to where I was 5 years ago. And so, I no longer want to litigate. So now I'm not litigating. If I was working for a firm, I wouldn't have that privilege. I would have to keep on
Mm.
doing maybe what didn't serve me or find a new job. So you have that freedom to pivot, and create the practice that you need in that moment. So that's what I love about having my own practice.
So you still feel like the risk is or the reward is greater than the risk.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the best things that I've done, I think, for myself, as far as just having that freedom and being able to help people, and also financially. I mean, having my own practice, I made more than I made in any other job. when I was working for someone else. So I think there is a space where you can make a good living, serve people, be well. Like I think that you can accomplish that by having your own business and your own practice too.
I know. It just takes so long to build.
Yeah.
It's not like, okay, I'm gonna have my own practice. Okay, I'm here.
It certainly is not an overnight thing. I think entrepreneurship is it's like it's difficult to describe, but you either have that like risk aversion or you don't, right? Like some people are like my husband. He is a person like I enjoy having a job and going and clocking in and clocking out, right? When you're a business owner, you know, there's a certain part of you that doesn't clock out, right? Because this is your thing. This is your baby. This is the things that you are creating, right? And so you have to be willing to have that kind of like power to pivot, right? Because something's not
Right.
working, then you got to change it. Then you got to update this. Then you have to wear this hat. So some people don't want that responsibility, and I respect that. But for me, I love being able to like figure out, okay, how can I make this easier for a client? How can I make this better? Does this new system serve me better? You know, and like thinking through all of the processes of trying to create a practice that helps more people and makes their life easier.
Do you feel like when you work in your own practice, you're able to manage burnout, or like, do you get burned out when you have your own practice?
I think there's potential. I think
Yeah.
you can get burnt out from anything if
Yeah.
you don't have like boundaries and clear direction and a vision that you're following. That's how when I started my practice, I ended up getting burnt out from doing that work, right? Even though it was my practice.
Hmm.
So I definitely think there's potential, but I also think that same potential is for you to create the things that work for you. Like today, like, you know, I was able to, my husband's not feeling well. So I was able to get up and take care of him and help him and, you know, get him something to eat. And then I was able to go and lift weights for an hour, right? And then I had a meeting and then I had another meeting. So it's like my schedule has changed based on what's going on in my life.
Mm.
And I think it would be very difficult for me to go back to someone telling me, okay, no, you can't go and walk your dog at noon. Like, I expect you to be doing this or that. You know what I mean?
I don't know, like, why the system, like, like, we imagine the system as some, like, alien hands, like, or like an octopus, just like, oh, this is a system, this is a system.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you have to do, you have to do it because it's always been done like that.
Yeah.
I don't know, sometimes, like, being an entrepreneur, there is risk, but there's definitely more rewards, and I believe that.
Yeah. I love that you pointed out that there's kind of like this idea that the system is like some third party and we don't really make the connection between like our own empowerment to be able to change what the
Hmm.
expectation is or what the system is doing
Yeah.
to us.
Yeah, because I definitely have like a lot of ideas, and I'm building a community of healthcare workers. I didn't know that lawyers deal with burnout and all that hectic, crazy stuff.
For sure. For sure. I mean, like alcoholism is so prevalent in
Really?
the lawyer industry because of like you're in this high pressure job, right? You have pressure from your employer, pressure from your clients, pressure from the industry. And a lot of people just turn to drinking, right? And you go to any type of lawyer event, it's, you know, 9 times out of 10, it's an open bar. There's a reason for that, you know, because there is a lot of burnout. Suicide is on the increase for lawyers specifically.
Mm.
So it's one of those things where it's like, you know, you have to figure out how you're going to take care of yourself while you're serving other people.
Yeah, and I think like not being like run over by the machine is very important, and realizing the power that you have. Like, you may want to stay with your employer right now, but at least have different streams of income, streams of outlet or
Yeah,
passions, so you
yeah,
can balance, so you don't make yourself crazy.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Is there a law that's unfair and outdated in healthcare that desperately needs to change?
Hmm. I mean, the insurance industry. I mean, can I say that?
Yeah, you can.
I just feel, I mean, obviously my own experience, but it just doesn't serve. It doesn't serve anybody except for the people that own those insurance companies,
I
right?
know.
Those executives and this, shareholders. But like, I feel like fundamentally we have to get back to the idea that like healthcare is to help people. And
Mhm.
I feel like that entire foundation has been subverted, right? Because now it's
Yeah,
like profits. Now it's like
yeah.
there's no attention to detail. There's no attention to like being well. Like this whole idea that we have to like manage all these chronic conditions and be on all these medications and all these different things. It's like, wouldn't it be amazing if our healthcare system actually like worked to work itself out of an industry? Like if people were
Mm.
just well and like not sick and like perpetually on different medications and all those things, like that's what I would say. Like if we could get back to wellness being like the foundational element of our healthcare system.
And I believe like preventative care is very important. Like sometimes it's too late to treat something when it's like been hidden and everyone's just treating the symptoms. But when you go to the root and you prevent bad things or bad things happening to your body, like that's really important because it's much easier to prevent than to cure.
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
know like what I wouldn't talk about it, but I don't know, it's just the way that the world is going right now is just like it's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary. I think the only thing that gives me hope is like my relationships with like my family and my friends, and I have relationship with God, and like I know that he's got me.
Right.
Like do you have like a support system at like you talked about your husband, do you have like a support system to help you in these crazy times?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. My husband, my mom is here. I have two sisters. My dog Grover, he's a huge support. And my therapist, and my trainer, like I have a whole little team, right? My little
Yeah.
wellness team that I work with, as needed to like get through the things or the difficult aspects of business ownership or a difficult case or a bad outcome. So yeah, I definitely lean on that and my relationship with God as well. So, my faith is really, really important to me and grounds me as I go through life, especially
Yeah.
in times like these.
Yes. So, is there anything I want to end on a high note that I took this I took it real downhill, but you said your relationship with God, and I know other people, other listeners have their own kind of relationships, like whatever works for you works for you. So,
Yeah.
can you tell me like the last time you experienced joy?
So I try to find joy in little things. So I'll start by saying that. But the first thing that came to mind was probably last week. I had a date night or a date day with my husband, and we literally like
Oh,
just stayed in, like, he cooked, we had popcorn, he makes popcorn from scratch, which is
no.
phenomenal. And it really was just an opportunity for us to connect. It's been a lot. Life has been lifing, for both of
Mhm.
us. And so I think just having those moments where you can connect and not be consumed with phones or work or anything like that. And I was just like, wow, this is really like an amazing and beautiful day. So that was probably what I would say is like top of mind for me right now, as far as a moment or a day where I really appreciated my relationship with him.
That is so awesome. And I really love expressing like gratitude. So thank you so much for being on the show. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with to wrap this up?
So thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today, Annmarie. I would just say if people would like to connect with me or if they need assistance with either starting a practice, growing a practice, and then also help medical professionals negotiate their employment contracts as well. You can find me at aedmondslaw.com or aedmondslaw on IG and YouTube. And I look forward to helping all of you all, build and refine your love for medicine.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Angie,
Thank you.
for being on the show. And I hope everyone who's listening and watching got a lot of information from Angie. And I'll put her contact details in the show notes. And I hope you have a great day and think of one thing that you're grateful for to get you through the next day. All right. Goodbye.
Bye.
Hello. Welcome to my live. I'm only going to be here for a few minutes. And I had a song. I was going to join in with the song. What song can I sing? I don't know. I just sang to welcome everyone in. Sing a happy song. Okay, let's sing. You're broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find the fighter. But I see it in you, so we can walk out and move mountains. We can walk it out and move mountains. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up in spite of the ache. I will rise 1,000 times again, and we'll rise up high like the waves. We'll rise up in spite of the ache. I will rise 1,000 times again for you, for you, for you. Welcome to my live. I want to thank everyone for joining and everyone watching the replay. Comment below if you are watching live. Comment when you are watching the replay. So I started that song with our Rise Up because the temperature of the world right now is kind of hectic. And today I want to talk about why your employees are checking out. Rise Up has been a song that I turn to when I feel like giving up. And your staff may be at that point right now and you don't even know. Like, you don't even know the signs. So today I'm going to bring some awareness of what engagement looks like and how to spot an employee that is checked out. So as I begin, I want to say welcome to everyone. And I am going to look at my notes. And I think I'm just going to welcome people in. And I usually go through the 3 things that I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for you all for watching, and I'm grateful for having health and strength, and I'm grateful for having family that I can talk to, and my therapist. I am going to go sit louder. Okay, you can't hear me. Okay, I am going to talk about all the things that I mentioned before, and it's just going to be about 10 minutes. So, how to recognize if your employee is checked out. So, this is based on experience and what I have put my ear to the ground and what I have developed over time because I've been a respiratory therapist for over 13 years. I have traveled to many different hospitals in California, in New York, in Hawaii, in Nigeria, and in Alaska and Florida, and right now, currently in Georgia. So, this is what I have seen, observed based on my time as a respiratory therapist. So, one of the things that can help you realize if your employee is checked out is if they are calling out a lot or they are increased tardies. Like if they don't usually like they usually show up on time, they usually show up ready, they usually don't call out, and all of a sudden there's a change, then that is a signal that your employee may be disengaged. And it could also mean that there is some personal issues going on in their life. And I think it's important for employees and employers to have that open communication when you are, I say, when I've been struggling, it's kind of like you don't want to feel like a burden to the team. So now I have made sure that I communicate with my all of the people who need to know. And also I support employers reaching out to employees and seeing how they are doing and actually wanting to know the real deal. Like, because people ask, they say, like, they ask you, "How are you? How are you today?" And people say, "I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine." But when you say, "How are you really?" Like, how are you really? And then they get they can be more open. And I believe developing trust with your employees is also important because when you develop that trust, they are more likely to communicate with you on a deeper level. And there is cost to disengage employees, like filling in for sick calls. And there's actually like about 60% of employees who are disengaged leave their jobs. So that's definitely more than 50%. So imagine if you have all these disengaged employees and then no one shows up to work. So this is like a very important topic, and turnover costs the employees about two times their salary. So two times an employee's salary is the cost of replacing and training a new employee in that employee's position. So it can range from 90 to 100,000 based on the training that is required and all the different non-productive hours that go into training an employee. And healthcare and frontline industries have one of the highest disengagement rates, and I believe it's because of the stress that we go through, and the awareness is better now, but the awareness wasn't where it was 5 years ago or 3 years ago. And we have the pandemic that happened in 2020 and the start of 2019. So that really affected everyone's resilience because we had this terrible virus that we had to help patients, and some patients we couldn't help. And that takes a toll on your mental health. So, understanding the different things that are happening in the world right now and the uncertainty in the world definitely contributes to disengagement with employees because not every employee can go into work and just forget about everything that's happening. They are human and we are human, and we we have a voice as well. That is another reason for disengagement of employees. And we talked about like the reasons employees are disengaged. And so we talked about the cost of disengagement. But now we're going to talk about the reasons why people are disengaged. There is sometimes it could be lack of recognition and appreciation. So when you are not congratulating them, she is, oh wait, when you are not making your employees feel valued, they are more likely to go to a different job. And that can really like dampen the workforce. And want to, we really want to value employees and know that they don't have to be there. And when you value your employees, you make them want to stay because an environment that is toxic will like not keep employees, but in a culture of support and a culture of trust is very important to keep employees engaged and being aware of what is happening in your employees' lives is also important as well. So I've been on for about 13 minutes, and the next time I go live, I will tell you I will tell you how to prevent disengaged employees and how to deal with disengaged employees. So check back with me on the live that will be happening next week, Monday around 5:30 ish, and I'll put an event out. And if you have any questions that you want me to address, let me know in the comments and subscribe and share if you found value in this talk. The next talk will be more structured because as I do this more, I'll be more comfortable. So I thank you for listening and I thank you for being willing to change the culture in your team. And I feel like that is very important to acknowledge because some team leaders, like, they don't care about their employees. They only care about the bottom line. So just from watching and getting more information, like, you're doing a great job. So I say thank you so much and have a wonderful day.